And one of the things that we definitely have in common.
Never thought Westerners could accept Orthodoxy. They would see it as some type of primitive nonsense.
And they were talking about Orthodoxy, and I was like, Orthodoxy? Like, Kyrie eleison Orthodox? Like, what are you talking about here?
Kyrie eleison. And then they go, Gospodi pomil.
It's back to your simulation theory.
Exactly. It
yeah. Like the whole peeing. Am I peeing in my
Right.
Yeah.
My mind is a bit mad. I'm aware of it. One of my favorite jokey things to do when I'm bored is like sing French or German song as sung by an American. Rien de rien, no, je ne regrette rien.
Frère Jacques, dormez-vous.
You don't. You speak Quebecois French, which is a crime against humanity.
This is true. Tabarnak.
Tabarnak. Oh God! When I first heard it, I wanted to fight someone. Look at this guy. You literally start seeming a bit mad even to yourself. I promise you, it's fun.
Yeah.
But you do get concerned, like, am I losing it? Sorry for the example, but diarrhea, why it's spelled. Not the best of jokes at parties.
At my party, you're always welcome to tell those jokes at my party.
Yeah, if it's a nerdy enough party, it will crush. But
All right, welcome to the Study of Stuff, everybody. I have my dear friend Sava with me, also known as Posh Redneck. I'm happy to actually know that your name is Sava. Of course, you're Serbian, so it's got to be probably usually Sava, George, or something along those lines.
Yep.
So welcome to the show, my dear brother.
Thank you for having me.
Many people have asked me to have you on for a number of different reasons, and I've been holding off for the right opportunity, and I think now is the perfect time to have you on for a number of different reasons. One of the things is because I've been talking a lot about converts versus Cradle, not as in versus as in fighting, but like the differences and how it's approached. How they approach the subjects, of faith, debates, all of that stuff. And so I thought it would be a perfect time to get another Cradle Orthodox on here with me, you being Serbian, myself being Greek. We do have a lot in common culturally. We have a lot of differences, yes, but we have a lot in common. And one of the things that we definitely have in common is this. These curtains. See these curtains?
Yeah. I see them all the time.
Well, I wanted to let you know, some of those are my parents' house. Some of them are my dear friend George and Alex Kristic from Toronto. I had them send me pictures, and I don't know whose are who. Like, they're hard to pick out because they look the same.
Yeah, it's just the pattern of the flowers tends to change up a bit. In this room, I've got 3 different ones.
Of course you do.
So, and then when we go throughout the entire house, it gets crazy.
Yes. And you know why I wanted to point that out? Because as soon as I started watching your streams, I'm like, I know those curtains. They're super, super Balkan. So I'm like, this dude has got to be Balkan, right? And then all of a sudden, your accent, I'm like, where's this guy from? This guy's got to be Serbian, just because of some of the things you were saying. And then at one point you mentioned it. I'm like, I knew he's a Serb. Because like Italians, like, because I grew up in Toronto, so Italian homes, Portuguese homes, this and that, you would think that they're the same, but they're not. It's just Greek homes, Russian homes, and Serbian homes. So like, I was like, what's going on with these patterns?
Apparently Romanians too. I've had people mention it to me on streams.
Okay.
So I guess it's Eastern European, but I'm not sure. I have not done a proper scientific study of it.
Maybe
We
we
have
should.
four confirmed ones.
We do, absolutely. And mine are from Canada. So they're like immigrants brought them. Like that's how
Right.
dedicated they are to these curtains. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I actually am so used to such curtains that I'd probably feel not uncomfortable, but sort of confused if I saw different ones, because different ones I see as either ceremonial or like those that divide a room up. So I don't know. As I said, it was so interesting to people the moment I showed them that I don't know what to do with it.
For sure.
I never thought about it as something unique until it was pointed out to me.
It is, and I think it fits well with our subject. Actually, joking as it is, it's funny, but it kind of also
Yeah,
fits
yeah.
it fits in together. Like because we all have a particular blend, a flavor of life. A lot of it's back to be culturally, but first and foremost is faith, right? So
Yes.
let's just get into it. Give me your backstory. Like, where did you grow up? Did you travel, this and that? How'd you get to languages? And also, have you considered yourself Orthodox the whole way through, or did you veer off at all?
Right. So I grew up in Serbia, here in a town called Prokuplje near Niš, Nisus, birthplace of Emperor Saint Constantine the Great.
Oh, okay.
If I say it, but if you go there, you will not need to be reminded. It's like about 30% of whatever companies and stores are called Constantine.
Of course,
So
of
they
course.
will remind you. Um, so I was born in '94, so fun time to grow up in Serbia. I was baptized on my first birthday, which isn't typical. Usually go for 40 days, but it was a pretty tumultuous time.
Yep.
And we just came out of hard, socialism into a more soft type of socialism, which was more nationalistic as opposed to this Yugoslav nationalism, which is multi-ethnic, multicultural. So people were sort of receding back into their national identities. All the member states, sometimes hyper-nationalism, but generally in a national direction. So I was baptized. My parents weren't particularly religious. My grandparents even less so. But as time went on, they grew in faith. Not to say that they were particularly devoted, but it definitely increased. They started to celebrate what we call Slava in Serbia. It's like a family baptismal patron saint. Mine would be Sveta Petka, Saint Paraskiva Petka.
Oh, Paraskiva. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, there are multiple of those. So the Serbian one, not the martyr one.
Yes, yes.
The one who lived as an ascetic. So my grandparents, both sets of my grandparents worked in education. So any religious, expression was very quickly sanctioned by communist authorities. So, including I went privately to German classes. The man who held them was always faithful, but when he was in high school, he snuck into the local church for his family's patron saint day.
Okay.
And he was seen by one of the professors and was almost expelled, which would have ruined his life back in the day.
This is under Tito, right?
I'm not sure. Maybe it was later in the 80s. He died in 1980.
Okay.
But guessing by his age, I'm not exactly sure. Probably during Tito.
Yep.
So we didn't have as repressive a system as you would find in the Warsaw Pact. That was just utterly brutal. I was more relaxed, but still no religion and no questioning the party.
Of course.
but we did have like rock music, which you wouldn't find in, in the Warsaw Pact. It was seen as a degenerate capitalist whatever. But I mention this to give you the background of my family, because when that whole wretched thing fell apart, they did start going back into it. And my father, who was always religious, but sort of like more conspiracy theory oriented than some type of catechetical instructions, he did want myself and my brother to grow up Orthodox, but always had an approach that if he pushes it, it will, backfire. So what he did is talk to a priest who lives down my street and asked for like a children's Bible.
Okay.
And so he just sort of placed it in our room.
Okay.
And both my brother and myself did develop an interest. And when I started going to primary school, which is the first step you take for formal education, you do have like preschool and stuff, but that's more childcare than it's about education, just play games and stuff.
Yeah.
And the practice was reestablished where you could pick one class per week for either religious studies or civic studies. And I picked the religious one. And that's when we started having, more formal instructions. It was held by priests, sometimes by lay theologians with the blessing of the church. So the church was in charge of it, because priests are busy people. Yes, My priest has 7 children. So and that's, I'm talking about biological, not to mention all the spiritual children he would have to take care of throughout the parish.
Well, Father Turbo has 8. Father Turbo is my spiritual father. He has 8.
Bless him.
God bless him. Yes.
Turbo Quails.
Yes. Father Turbo.
Turbo should give it away, not a particularly common name, but I'm just making sure.
Yes.
So I that's how I grew up in the faith, but I did become an atheist at about 12.
Okay.
So one dynamic you have in former Yugoslav countries is that people, as I said, remember communism more fondly than you would in, not to mention the Warsaw Pact, but like the Soviet Union proper, because in Poland it's a different story. You're occupied. But you had these stories of, you had like 13th pay and the government would actually finance your vacations, and no one ever had to worry about money, and the streets were safe and everything was going great. And at that time I lacked both the depth and the breadth of knowledge and experience to understand that this was all done by both money that was a bribe not to join the other side in the Cold War. So both sides would be giving money to Yugoslavia. And then also massive debt and inflation.
True. Very true.
So completely unsustainable. But as far as they were concerned, they were just living life. You wouldn't get any, private enterprise that would talk about it. So, good luck finding out how everything is operating. True. As far as you were concerned as a regular citizen, you just get to live a very decent life. And then contrast that with my growing up during the wars and then the bombing campaign of 99 on Serbia proper and Montenegro. And then you develop like a hatred for the West, and then this story of how things were better back in the day. I had almost like a schizophrenic meltdown when I was 10, when I thought, how do I know anything is real? Do I know when I'm going to the bathroom? This one really did a number on me. When I was going to the bathroom, what if I was actually mentally ill and I'm actually with my parents on some fancy party and I'm actually just urinating on like a birthday cake? And so my struggles with solipsism started very early on.
Wow, that's quite yeah. Because that'd be like those moments where you're sleeping and you think that you're in the bathroom while you're dreaming,
Yes.
and then you wake up and
Yes.
you're like, oh boy, that wasn't the bathroom.
Yeah,
in reverse.
those things happen. Yeah. But you're awake.
yeah.
But I suppose I gave up on that because it was just too taxing on me mentally.
Yeah.
Like, well, if it is, it is. I can't fix it. I have no method by which I could get an answer to this problem. But I did develop an atheistic tendency. The biggest reason for it was theodicy. If God is good, why is there evil in the world?
Yes.
And I still attended religious classes. I never switched to civic classes because I always considered those to be a waste of time. One of my instructors in these religious classes said, ironically, as I'm preparing to light a cigarette, he said, in civic classes, they'll tell you where it's appropriate and inappropriate to smoke. And in religious classes, we tell you that it's a vice to smoke. So,
the contrast.
Right. Oh, yeah. So he basically said they're teaching you how to behave appropriately, not morally.
Right.
And that stuck with me. Also, it was all run by women who had a sociology degree, and I knew very early on in my life that is someone you'd want to avoid at all costs.
Yes, yes, 100%.
So it didn't last long. It took about 2.5-3 years for it to break down. But it's not like I had some philosophical background to fall on. It was, as you said, we will talk about converts versus cradles. It's sort of, this is what you do. So if you ask me, what's the difference between the Orthodox and the Catholics? It's like we don't have a pope and their priests don't have beards, and that's the extent to which I could explain it in my early teens.
Yes.
Protestantism I knew nothing about. I just knew there were Anglicans and their priests have, purple cassocks. So the knowledge of the differences came later on. But I was very interested in, creationism versus science because I was always a nerd, and I loved biology, I loved geography and stuff. So geography in the broader sense, when you study it at school, it includes a lot of things like the origin of mountains and stuff. So when I was introduced to creationism, I wasn't introduced by any Orthodox people because that's not a big topic in Orthodox circles. True. Nowadays, definitely, but back in the day, it was just ignored. No one cares.
True.
We talk about morality and spiritual instructions, and that's 90% of what you would get. And then of the remaining 10%, 9 of them is stories from the Bible and lives of the saints. But I was introduced to basically low church Protestantism, and even though people who tend to talk about creationism didn't at least focus a lot on theological studies or topics, every so often they would mention it, and I remember really getting struck by "Call no man father."
Yes. Okay. Yeah.
Because prima facie, it does seem pretty clear. So I never became Protestant, but I was sort of nowhere. I was back in the faith in a sense, and I want to be Orthodox, but then I'm having these doubts and not sure which way to go. Ultimately, I studied up on it and started building this resistance uh, to these questions and lines of inquiry, because I gathered a better understanding of my own faith.
Well, how did you start coming to that conclusion? Sorry, because that's an important point. Like, squaring your own faith. Obviously, you're doing it through learning and reading. But what were the aha moments? Or like, okay, this and that.
Mm-hmm. Right. So it has to be said that this would be inverse for converts, because for me, I didn't want to be non-Orthodox. Like I assume a lot of Protestant or Catholics would not want to be something else. So it started off that even the smallest of answers would give me respite. Then those started to accumulate. When you hear "call no man father," then you start reading up on how the term is used, and that Christ himself uses it. Your father Abraham rejoiced to see my day. So why was he calling it father? Like, did he not know? And stuff. Also, you get a lot of pressure from a local level on, do you know that Saint Elijah is just like a makeshift replacement for Perun, like the Slavic god of thunder?
Yes.
I was like, yes. I know we call him Ilya Gromovnik, so the thunderer, I suppose.
Yeah.
But I wasn't that acquainted with the story. At this point, I was finding out, wait, that he's called that because of the whole incident with the Baal priests and prophets and whatever, like that sacrifice off that they had. And then you also start asking very common sense questions that when you get into the topic itself, you ignore very, very common sense questions. Like, why would they adapt it from Israel at that time to a Slavic god? Wouldn't you have to pass a couple of others before you got there?
Yes. Yeah.
Similarly, that's what they do Easter and Ishtar.
Yeah.
So basically, it's Greeks. Not called Easter anywhere between Mesopotamia and England.
Yes.
But that's where they got it from.
Yes. Greeks love this too because of all the paganism and the 12 gods of Olympus and 12 and 12 and Saturnalia. And you're like, oh, come on, man. Anyway, sorry.
Saturnalia, by the way, wasn't on the 25th.
That's right. It was not.
It was earlier.
It was.
But that really buggers the point. So
it does.
Really annoying when you've got such a great point to have it ruined.
Yep.
Zeitgeist didn't hold up, unfortunately,
for them. That's right.
But and also like the three gods in the Roman Parthenon and Pantheon.
Pantheon, yeah.
So they don't seem to realize. Everyone wants to use sort of a post hoc ergo propter hoc. After this, so because of this, we have ancient Greeks, philosophers, mathematicians, etc., who really love the number 3.
Yes, they did.
But similar to how you have the term logos, the word logos, that then you connect it to the Greek usage. Ironically, this view is more popular in Catholic circles than in Greek circles.
True.
But the word of God is a concept from the Old Testament. Now, there is overlap with what the Greeks discovered, but that's what we would call logos grammaticos. The idea that there is an extent to which you can find out about God by means of natural revelation. I'm not sure if the Orthodox even use it. I know that that term is used in Western Christianity, like special and special and natural revelation.
Oh, see, yes.
I don't think we make that distinction on some academic level. But it's at least in a colloquial sense it can be made. So there is truth in paganism and stuff, but the point is that we don't go for good enough, because truth is Christ himself. And we should endeavor to both strive towards him and to try and help others strive towards him.
Yep.
But that's basically at the point I was sort of embattled with atheism is now gone, but now I don't know where I am exactly as a Christian, but I'm trying to stick to orthodoxy. It's getting easier and easier, and ultimately, by the time I was pretty solid, I started searching out things on the internet, which I never expected to find Orthodox people in the English-speaking world.
Yes. Yes.
And there were two very important events, both from some, I can't remember the name of the show now. I can remember the two Orthodox people who were on it, but it's like some Protestant pastor or whatever who hosts this show. And I saw he was talking to an old man, an Orthodox priest, white beard, black cassock, big cross. I was like, okay, let's check this out. And his name was Seraphim Cordoza.
I don't know. Okay.
Father Seraphim Cordoza.
Okay.
And I was expecting some heavy Eastern European accent, but there was none.
Yeah.
So I was confused, It would be one thing if he was young and, he's like third generation immigrant. But no, he wasn't a third generation immigrant. He was actually Portuguese ethnically.
Okay.
But he was
in
American.
The States? Okay, American. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
And obviously a great relationship between the two. They were personal friends. But, I started listening, but I was getting shocked. Like, I never thought Westerners could accept Orthodoxy. I thought they would never accept it. They would see it as some type of primitive nonsense.
Yes.
The Catholics. If you grew up in Serbia, your idea of the Catholics are the Croats and then the atrocities of the Second World War.
Yep.
So you're not going to have the best idea of what the Catholics are like. Turns out they're much friendlier on the global level.
yeah, that's true.
At least no genocide. Which helps.
Yeah.
So, then Father Seraphim, who reposed, unfortunately, a couple of, I think last year, actually. But he appeared with now an abbot. Now, it wasn't just a cassock, you had the full full gear of a monastic. Long hair, even bigger beard, white.
Yeah.
Thinking, okay, here's the accent. No accent whatsoever.
Yeah.
And this was Abbot Trifon.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And him you're going to be probably aware of. If you're aware of anything in English-speaking Orthodoxy, there are a couple of people you're definitely aware of.
Definitely.
But this is the first time seeing him. And I believe he's of Norwegian, extraction. So again, not an ethnic thing, which I don't see as any type of obstacle, nor as anyone is less Orthodox or whatever based on. But if he said, "Oh, I'm actually from one of my parents is from Russia or Romania, Serbia, etc." I could see it like sort of going down the roots. But no, it was no such thing. His parents were Lutheran. So I get invigorated, actually.
Yep.
So I'm now looking these people up, listening to what I can find, and because it brought me great pleasure to know that there's Orthodoxy can exist in all of these other nations. And it took a while before I discovered someone like Jay Dyer.
Yep.
Actually, by accident, I was looking for stuff on the Nephilim.
Okay.
And someone in the comments of the video I was watching say, "Hey," because obviously it was Protestants talking about it. But someone in the comments said, hey, you should talk to Jay Dyer. He is an Orthodox Christian who talked about this topic. I was like, well, and say no more.
I'm off. I'm ready.
Yep. So I did find Jay did a couple of videos on it, and then I started listening to him more and more, which really helped me expand my faith in a philosophical.
Sorry, what year are we talking about with Jay?
About 2020.
Okay.
Around that time, I can't tell you exactly.
Okay.
But at this point, I was serving as a reader in my church, and so I was solid in the faith. But he really helped me expand on it philosophically, and then learning a lot with details about comparisons with Catholicism, and if nothing else, a lot of things I read, I know what to follow up on.
Yes.
So it really, really expanded my faith in a more philosophical direction, because in Orthodoxy we don't tend to do that a lot.
Yep.
It's very difficult to find philosophical books.
So
it's always Lives of the Saints, some historical lecture, historical account of Orthodoxy, and Mount Athos, obviously. That takes like 40% of all Orthodox literature.
So true, though. It's so true. I found the same thing when I came back to the faith, and it was through Jay Dyer. He opened up that whole world of there's a totally different way of seeing this whole thing.
Yes.
Sorry, keep going.
Right. So it wasn't just holy people with beards.
Right.
A lot of these holy people with beards were very good at philosophy. So that just skyrocketed my interest in these topics, and I obviously most of my time was in linguistics and studying languages, and then my pet project. So you do music, right? I do love the piano. That's my favorite thing to do, and so I would like practice my piano, listen to Jay Dyer and stuff.
Okay.
So it was very fun. But that's a very long-winded response to saying, did I veer off into atheism? Yes, and I did have a period of uncertainty, but never formally left the church nor subscribed to any other non-Orthodox belief system.
Yeah, that's actually I like the overview you did. You covered a lot of ground, actually, and also you kind of started the conversation of the difference between convert versus cradle, because a lot of the things you said I could fully relate to, even though I didn't grow up in an Orthodox country. I grew up in Canada, but I did grow up around a lot of Greeks, and we're really, really passionate about our culture, and Serbs and Romanians.
I am aware.
I know you are. For sure. So most of my friends were Greek, Serbian, Russian, and all that stuff. So even for us, I could relate to the story you're talking about, finding Orthodoxy online. I remember the first time I started seeing Xeni, non-Greeks, non-Serbians, all that. Non-ethnics talking about it. I was confused. And one of the first was Jay Dyer and a guy named James Perloff. And they were talking about Orthodoxy. And I was like, Orthodoxy? Kyrie son Orthodox? What are you talking about here? I was so confused, right? And then when that whole world opened up to me, I was like, okay, so I don't understand my faith. I need to learn it from non-Greeks. At that time I was saying Xeni, right? And I was like, this is kind of a weird, humbling experience to some degree. But my first instinct was kind of like, what are you talking about? What do you know about Orthodoxy? And then I would hear them say stuff, and I'm like, oh, I don't know anything about Orthodoxy. Let me just sit down, be quiet, and listen from the, you know what I mean? So it was jarring. It was a strange, it was even a strange psychological experiment, watching my mind work through all this stuff and learn. It was very strange, very strange. So I like hearing your story because I could relate to a lot of the key points you're referring to. So now, languages, where did because it all fits in together. I could tell by your story. Languages, where did the love of languages come from? What attracted you? What kept you there? And how did you attach that? Was it getting into theology first, or was it a post theology thing? How did that all fit together?
So here's the thing: let me give you a piece of transition
Please.
between the two topics.
Please.
I tell people I probably know more about English than a regular English speaker
I believe
because I had to learn it on, let's say, from an academic perspective. I didn't grow up in an English-speaking place. So when people say, why don't you speak normal English? You speak this fancy one. I'd have to go and learn a normal English.
Yes.
Right? If you grew up in the US, UK, Canada, wherever, you grew up with a parochial expression of the English language.
Correct.
So you're used to it. My experience learning it was if I, don't use... I will have been finishing by the time you write. I get bad marks.
Yeah.
So I am properly trained and habituated to speaking fancy English. Exactly because that was my interaction with it.
Makes
Obviously,
sense.
you watch films and like comedies and stuff, but you don't practice it.
That's true. Yep.
So similarly, that is what happens when you find someone like Jay, who didn't grow up in Orthodoxy. So everything is new to him. So now he has to learn, why is this like that? Why is the other thing not the third thing? And you are basically forced to learn a lot more than someone who just grew up. This is, on this day we celebrate this, and these are the traditions we follow. These are the prayers to this saint, etc. This is how you make the sign of the cross. It's just something you internalize by practice, not by study.
Yep.
Speaking of study languages, I tell people who are English speakers, native English speakers, they have one huge advantage, which is that English is spoken all over the world. But they also gain a disadvantage, which is there is no other language that is that omnipresent. So me as a Serb in Serbia, I had constant contact with a foreign language in stuff I liked, like video games and TV shows and whatnot. So I get to hear it spoken whenever I'd like. I suppose that it wouldn't be too difficult for an American, to watch something in Spanish. But then again, you lose video games, you lose a lot, because one of the best things about learning languages through video games is the interactivity.
True.
So it's not just one-sided, practicing, oral or written comprehension.
Right. It's a conversational thing.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
So that was a massive thing. But I didn't start off exactly out of some love for the languages. It was just that I liked watching Cartoon Network, and God damn it, I'm going to have to understand what's happening.
Yes, yeah.
So I was just absorbing a lot of it, and when video games came around, that really pushed it to a whole new level. And then my particular taste in both literature and video games, I love epic fantasy. Okay. And one thing about epic fantasy, languages in epic fantasy, is that they tend to be rather sophisticated.
Yes.
It really helps in the world generation.
True. Yeah.
You can't have like street thugs talking there. Even the street thugs in epic fantasy are a bit fancy.
That's true.
So it helped expand my vocabulary. It made sure I didn't get exposed to too much of the poor grammar, formally speaking, right? So in everyday usage, colloquially, it would be perfectly fine. But so it helped me train myself in English. I didn't get English until in school, until I was 10. Nowadays, they start earlier. But back in my day, you started in 3rd grade of primary school.
Still early. That's still early.
Well, you get a second foreign language in 5th grade, which was for me French. Okay. But as far as English was concerned, I was really good at it before I even started having it formally. So it's a talent in a sense.
for sure. For sure.
And one that you are free to work on while having fun. So I can't even take credit for it. But then I really liked it. And it just became fascinating to me how, like, when you think about your brain is working on two different levels. There's a phase in which you start learning a language, and everything you do is sort of translating to your own language, and then to a meaning the meaning you would associate it with in your language. As you get more accustomed, you start going directly from foreign word or phrase to meaning.
Yes. Yep.
And until you get there, you will get nowhere near proficiency. Because you can't have this constant, how shall we say, detour you have to take before you speak to anyone.
Yes.
It works in school settings. It works when you're trying to have a bit of fun, like trying to say something in Mandarin, and, people will have patience for it. But if you're trying to be actually proficient, you just work at it until you start associating things.
True. Very true.
Then there were difficulties learning it in such a informal manner, like spelling. Differences between British and English, British and American spelling.
Yep.
Really did a number on me before we had lessons about it at school.
Yep, I could see that.
Because I couldn't glean from TV shows and games whether you spell armor with a U or not.
Right.
So it kept gaslighting me, Wait, I thought it was, every time I see it, I thought it was with a U. I guess I was wrong. Then the next time I see it with a U. I thought
it's back to your simulation theory.
Exactly.
Yeah. Like the whole peeing. Am I peeing in my
Right. Yeah. I'm telling you, it's like someone is intentionally messing with you.
Yeah.
And a lot of the verbiage that like generalizes that with a Z or an S.
Yes.
Is it a Z or a Z?
Yes. Z.
Because in school we learn to sing the ABCs with a Z.
Yes.
So I don't know. But where I got to high school, I already developed a lot of the knowledge of grammar in general necessary to start learning languages on my own. So you start getting your hands on, textbooks. They are organized in a manner, in paste and whatnot, to instruct someone who's only just starting. And again, this is a talent, a skill you can work on, but trying to replicate sounds and disambiguating between the sounds and like nuances. You would know in Greek, like the difference between like a delta and a theta.
Yep.
A th and a th.
Yeah.
So for some people that's almost indistinguishable, but for me it never was. But that's again something I was born with. So like people who have perfect pitch, you are just born with it. Obviously you can practice and turn it into a much more useful skill if you know what to do with it, but it's sort of just something you either have or don't.
True.
And continued exposure does help alleviate some of the shortcomings of not having it naturally. But it does help when you're learning on your own. A lot of people have great command of a language, but they just can't produce the sounds.
Very true. Yep.
I know them. So that's a separate skill set from knowing how to speak a language.
That's a very good point, actually. Yes, that's a very good point. That makes a big difference on how we view the world and how we interpret information. Because I'm the opposite. I can pronounce well, I guess because I'm a musician, but I can't formulate proper sentence. Because I'm in Mexico, when I speak Spanish, sometimes I'll say something like, estoy tratando hablar español. And they're like, oh, this guy knows a lot of Spanish. And he start throwing words at me. But then
and you're gone.
And I'm like, no, I sound like I know, but I don't know anything. And then I know friends of mine who are the opposite. They sound like it's all broken, but they can speak a lot of Spanish. So it's a good point that you brought up, actually.
I have a whole because my mind is a bit mad. I'm aware of it. But one of my favorite jokey things to do when I'm bored is like sing French or German songs as sung by an American.
Yeah.
Let me think of one. If you've heard Edith Piaf, Rien de Rien. So you go.
How does it go?
Non, rien de rien. Non, je ne regrette rien.
Yeah.
Ni le mal. Oh, okay.
I know that because I'm Canadian, so we speak Spanish, some French.
You don't. You speak Quebecois French, which is a crime against humanity.
This is true. Tabarnak.
Tabarnak. Oh God! When I first heard it, I wanted to fight someone.
That's awesome.
No, nothing personal.
No, I take no offense to that at all whatsoever.
So again, I just started singing like "Rien de rien, no, je ne regrette rien," and for some reason it's just so funny to me.
No, I love it. It's great.
And I don't do like a German singing French songs because it's like somehow with an American it's funny.
It is.
Not even the British one is funny.
Is it the Frère Jacques, dormez-vous?
so but it helps with these types of plays.
Yeah,
it does help you learn and solidify things. And I always tell people when they want to start learning a language, I say invest heavily at the very beginning. Invest heavily in the phonetics. It will pay off. There are a couple of things you should invest heavily in the very beginning, because if you don't, you will have to sort of reverse engineer the process later on, and you will have spent quite a bit of time practicing your grammar, your conjugations, declensions, whatever it is on, in that language. And now you're saying, well, now I want to make it fancy, so now I'll start learning my phonemes and how to pronounce things properly.
Good point.
Turns out you've spent like a year pronouncing it poorly and have developed a muscle memory for it.
This is a great point. Great point.
So that is the first thing you should invest in if you can find like tapes. And nowadays, thank God, it's very easy to find recordings. People are very willing to share their languages. So invest heavily in pronunciation. When I was learning Greek, I remember learning how to pronounce Rama, R.
Yeah. Soft.
Yeah, it almost made me gag.
Yeah.
But ultimately, you practice it and you get better at it.
Yeah.
The sh gets a bit more whistly
than
used to. But you listen, you repeat. Don't focus too much on what it means. Just pronounce the words.
This is a good point.
Because that's how you practice.
Yeah, because I remember when I was trying to learn some Serbian here and there, which I didn't really learn much, but there's like a y sound. I can't even pronounce and I was like saying like George. Like, there's like a guttural thing which we don't have, and I was like, how do you do this, man? It's crazy.
I can explain it if you'd like, but I don't know if it's the best use of this interview.
Take it any which way you want to go, brother. We are going to get into some of this stuff, so go with it, whatever, because I think it has a lot to do with how we interpret our reality, is like languages, the sounds, and how you phrase things, how you put things together. Where does language come from? So go wherever you want to go from, because that's where we're heading in that direction, because we're going to get biblical here.
Okay. So the second thing I would suggest when people want to learn in a language is learning the very basics of the grammar. Mm-hmm. And people get a bit upset because they go through the basics rather quickly, depending on the language. Some languages, like Slavic languages, and then Serbian is at the top of complexity when it comes to grammar. Mm-hmm. 7 cases, and if you go for Bulgarian, Macedonian.
Whoa.
North Macedonia.
Yes.
They have no grammatical cases, but then Eastern and Western Slavic languages have 6, and then Serbian has got 7. So, grammatical cases are hellish for people who don't have them.
Yep.
Greek has 4, modern Greek has 4, German has different set of 4, but then English and French have none except remnants of it in pronouns.
Yep.
He, him.
Yep.
And then in Serbian you need to learn, not 4 more, because you can't have a vocative for them. But nevertheless, it's invest in those basics, because languages, when you start learning them, and in textbooks they're presented intentionally in this way, basics are there, but they won't give you 10 lessons on basic sentence structure. They will give you some lessons on basic sentence structure, because they will expand on it later on.
Right.
So if you just say, well, this is easy, but you don't actually grasp exactly what's going on, when things get more complicated, you will regret it. I promise you that. When I started learning Latin in school, I was a bit disinterested. And then I thought, I can't really fail at Latin. That's a pretty cool thing to be good at Latin.
Yeah, for sure. Especially if you want to get into theology.
Oh, yeah. That wasn't my concern back in the day, because I didn't exactly associate Latin with theology. Right. I associated with Rome, the empire.
Yeah.
So I thought it was very cool. But again, you're just starting high school. You're a bit disinterested. Hormones are gushing through you, and it's a pretty mad time of your life. As someone said it. Yep. Puberty is basically being a psychopath for a couple of years.
It's so true, though. It's so true.
You have absolutely no idea. You're experiencing all of these new changes, both anatomical and psychological, and you've got literally nothing to fall back on.
That's so true.
As far as experience, because it's the first time experiencing it. And then everyone who tries to give you advice sound like they're gaslighting.
It's true. It's true.
So it's something we all have to go through. But it did have this side effect of having a somewhat reduced interest in investing into Latin. And then before the exams started, I sat down, and in a literal day, I got into the basics of it.
Okay.
Because I had some vague knowledge from classes. But then after that, I literally never forgot them again. And it really paid off, because it gets very complex later on. In certain structures, you will find no analog anywhere. So from Greek, you will know that the passive is constructed not with an auxiliary verb. So, you don't say to be read, or is being read, or something. This song is being sung. It's not with a participle and a verb. It's just a different set of the a non sequitorism.
Yeah, tragudas. You wouldn't say tha tragud. You would say tragudas. I just sing.
Yeah. And it really sort of starts discombobulating you, because in Serbian you don't have that, in English you don't have that, any other before I had encountered before had that structure, so you need to get used to it. You feel like there's something missing, and it doesn't sound like a passive voice if it's only one verb. So that's something you invest in, and then the constructs later on that require the passives, and there's a future and past infinitive, if you could even imagine how that works. But and it doesn't work in the way we think of it, because there are all types of constructs, like the accusative and the infinitive, which I won't get into. But I'm telling you, these idiosyncrasies really, really start being very taxing on a person, And if you haven't invested into the basics, they will really frustrate you, and you will start feeling like you're stupid.
I could see that.
But it's not. It's like not investing properly in like trigonometry.
Right.
And then you have no idea why you're even doing all of this. You just know, well, this sign goes with this. It starts feeling like in Serbia we say "namishiche." You're doing it by your muscles alone. It's like forcing yourself through it instead of having a proper understanding.
Yes.
So that's my experience with languages, how I started, and it just went on from there. The more languages you learn, the easier it becomes to add more later on, because you've already developed a sort of way of thinking that allows you to shift from language to language. With your first language, that's very difficult. Yep. With the second, already easier. By the time you're on your fifth, you're going pretty well. Obviously, it can take a left turn when you leave like the Indo-European group of languages, and now you have to deal with a different. It would still be easier, but sure. I'm not saying by the time you got to your fifth, then you've learned only European languages, and then you switch to Mandarin, and like that won't be a
you
different.
Speak Mandarin as well, too, right?
I speak a little, but I had to abandon that because I was learning Japanese and some Mandarin, so I can say like "Ranshani Watcher Gaising." Glad to meet you.
Okay. Okay.
But that was a point at which I realized I so overstretched myself. I mentioned this in a stream. I don't know if it was mine or Jim Bob's. I said I was learning 7 languages simultaneously and figured out that I wasn't learning 7 languages simultaneously. I was stagnating actively in 7 languages instead of learning 4.
I see. Yeah. Especially when you're flipping from like European languages, which are Greek and Latin based, and then you're flipping over to Mandarin and kanji Japanese, with like Japanese and stuff like that. It's just totally different frame of reference, which is actually a good way of segueing in a bit to the religious questions of like Protestants versus Catholics versus Orthodox.
Right. So we have the experiential understanding of language. We don't tend to go too deeply into it unless you want to, and even then, it becomes very difficult because you're using language to understand language, and it gets very abstract, and most people just give up. Again, starts sounding like gaslighting.
Right.
Here's one important principle to remember. Words have no inherent meaning. It just does not exist.
Yes. Very true. Yep.
At the same time, words do have meaning.
Yep.
So you've got this modernist position on one hand, and postmodernist position on the other hand. And in most of the discussions, especially in religious matters and matters of exegetical, disciplines of the Bible, you see those two clashing.
Yes.
So the
keep going.
Thinking of things like, the Bible was actually changed to hide the fact that God wanted human sacrifice to make themselves look better. So no one thought that was weird back in the day.
Yep.
At least in that part of the world. Romans weren't too fond of it, and sort of banned it where they conquered. Carthago del Est. They weren't fond of all the Baal and Moloch worship either. Now, Romans weren't exactly gentle people. They made a science out of torturing people to death. But there were things that they did find rather obscene. Even in Greece, you had like sacrifice of children very early on. The Lycinian games, you would have someone would like sacrifice a child, you sort of bite a piece out of it because that's what sacrifice is. You sort of burn something to feed it to the deity.
Even in the Iliad description of sacrifice to get the wind going.
Yeah, because it's all about turning things aerial.
Yes.
And one way to do that is burning it. It becomes smoke.
Yes. Like the word spirits and boiling.
Yes.
Yeah.
Spiritus, it means wind or breath.
Yes.
Same with Greek psyche.
Psyche, bravo! You sound Greek, dude. When you said that psyche, you said that perfect, beautiful.
I lack the nose and the facial hair, but I
Hey, you got some facial hair kicking. Don't worry, you're halfway there.
some.
Some. Yeah.
Greeks not exactly known for having some facial hair.
That's true. I'm currently growing mine.
You shaved this morning, probably.
I did. Exactly.
So yeah, but that's what it means. But also that's what we get in the Bible as well, in the Hebrew.
Yeah.
It's all related to this. So, but now we're modern people.
Yep.
We think of breath as merely an activity, like you're breathing, as in inhale, exhale.
Yep.
We don't think of it as some type of like elemental thing.
Yep.
Like even in when discussing, the four basic elements, you have different divisions of those as well. But I'm talking one people would be aware of today, like fire, water, earth, and air, or wind.
Yep.
Right. We wouldn't include breath in that because we've so separated it from anything other than the activity of, inhale the oxygen, exhale the carbon dioxide. But in the old languages, that's what we see, because they're trying to say something is not material. It's not hard. You can't touch it.
Yes.
You can technically say air is something, right? It is material. You can produce resistance. But that they're trying to express a reality. They're not thinking the way a modern person does.
Very true.
And this is why when St. Paul says, we're dealing with the powers and principalities of the air, it's not like he's saying like demons are flying around, slapping people around. They can manifest in some physical activity. That's not what's at question. It's like, it's not here, but it's like in a different dimension here. Things start getting wacky. No, he's trying to describe something like immaterial. It's not their body is not our body.
Yeah, it's because like in Greek, like sorry to interrupt, to jump in there, because I'm as you're saying these things, I'm working with some of the words in my head in Greek, because aera to air, is not the same as psyche or anapnoi to take a breath. There's a complete distinction between the two, and there is like a metaphysical. So even when you're trying to like, sometimes people will say like, well, what does that mean in Greek? I have to give them 5 English words that aren't exactly the same to describe one Greek word sometimes, because there's like a meta a definition to a word, right? It means a lot. Like psyche and anapnoi are 2 different things, but someone could mistake them if they're speaking English.
Especially because anapnoi, you have that ana, which is like repetition. Like the Latin equivalent is re.
Yes.
Reconsider.
Yes.
Anastasis, to stand again.
Yes, exactly.
So there are nuances, and that's what I wanted to explain with my first mention of the principle that words don't have inherent meaning, but they do have meaning. They gain this meaning from their usage.
Yep. Yes.
So it does not matter that you can break down a word etymologically and say, well, this is what it means. That's not how language works.
Correct.
Very early on, when I was jumping on Jim Bob streams, I gave the examples like his books, like Savage Memes. Right, meme basically also comes from like Greek and like mimicry and stuff. Plato, not a big fan of mimicry.
Yes.
So not a big fan of arts.
That's true. That's true.
You know that famous painting of the Academia with Plato and Aristotle?
Yeah.
And I made a joke and like crop Aristotle and then say my opinions on arts generally. Yeah. And then flip to Plato saying my thoughts on artists when I meet art students. I think they should be expelled from the city.
Yeah. That's good. I like that. That's good. That's really good.
So back to our topic. I said savage memes. I said, oh, we're doing a stream. What's a stream?
Uh-huh.
Can I drink it?
Uh-huh.
Can I cook with it? You start being obtuse for the purpose of like reductio ad absurdum. You're trying to explain to people that words change meanings all the time, especially with mass communications nowadays. Like the memes have really, really changed how we even interact with each other.
Very true.
Because it's a whole new type of humor.
Yes, it is.
That is very abstract and very meta. Like remember when we used to see dank memes? That's now anachronistic. It's a bit archaic. But dank just means like dark and whatever. But it had its own meaning, and it's still a legitimate meaning because it points to a reality.
Yes. Yes.
It doesn't matter that oh, we wouldn't use it for that. That is something that is in the purview of technical manuals.
Yes. Yep.
And in technical manuals or of law, you have to be very, very precise. So if how many things do we use that are used in law to be very, very specific, or in medicine, or like in computer science, etc., that would have a pretty specific meaning, but we then sort of abstract it out, loosen it up a bit in colloquial terms, because we're trying to analogize, trying to give a sense of it. When we say lethargy, that's supposed to just mean like pretty extreme sloth. But lethargy has its meaning in medicine. It's like a state of extreme weakness and stuff.
Yep.
But it doesn't matter. No, I can't. You can't correct me for using the term lethargy in a more general sense by appealing to its concise medical usage, because it's a living thing. A language is a living thing, and it's a pretty open system, unlike mathematics.
Can I just interrupt you really quickly? My apologies, because I like where you're going with this, and I want you to come back to it, because I think it's important that we explain, like, with the whole tag argument and that kind of stuff, where people kind of, will bring up mathematics, logic, reason, and language is a big part of it. Like it's something that it kind of pre-exists before we kind of start to give it rules and parameters, right? So I know even like Chomsky, people are not going to want me to mention Chomsky, and I get it, the whole like pseudo-communist thing, whatever. But in terms of his study of
anarcho-syndicalism, beg your pardon.
Yes, I like how you put that. That's very nice, very polite even. But his early studies on linguistics and languages, I think he makes a lot of good points where he kind of says like, it's not. There's something that's happening behind the scenes with language. Otherwise, if we looked at it linearly, and if we looked at it as like you take 1, 2, 3, put it together, you have a formula. If we were to learn languages that way, you wouldn't have been able to go from like, Serbian to Greek to Latin and then all the way to Mandarin, because there'd be a lot of like learning. It'd take you millions of years. Kind of like the whole like philosophy of evolution doesn't actually fit and doesn't work because we can't explain the in-betweens. So can I just get you to explain like your view on language as a logical thing, which kind of like how you were saying a word means something, but at the same time it can be adjusted, right? Because I think they fit together really well, which will set up the rest of the conversation well. Sorry for the little rant, but I love where you're going, and I want to make sure you hit all the buttons.
No, that's a good point to make. So Chomsky is very good at linguistics. His anarcho-syndicalism aside, he is very good at what he does. I would like to tell people to maybe watch this video, because it really gives some insight practically, much more so than me explaining it on in these more academic approaches. I believe the channel is called Soup Emporium.
All right, I'll check that out.
About Coco the gorilla.
Oh yeah, the Jane Goodall, I think her name was.
Yeah. Maybe it was someone else, but I think it was because that's a gorilla. She did more with chimps, so I'm not sure if it was her.
Okay.
But that's irrelevant. What is relevant is that scientists have been training or trying to train animals to use sign language, especially like the big primates, chimpanzees and gorillas.
Mm-hmm.
And Coco, the gorilla, is probably the most famous example. And then there were a couple of things that, you would have the behaviorist understanding of language. So you basically just learn to associate this word with that, either concept or object or whatever. So that's the behaviorist one. And that's the type of thinking that leads you to believe that you could teach a gorilla to use sign language. Because you're just teaching it to associate this movement with this object or this activity.
Yep.
But then you have Chomsky, who said there's something so uniquely human and not exactly understandable that allows us to speak, that allows us to explain things. Because it's not like mathematics, because mathematics is sort of a product more of language than it's like a similar type of process, but it's, as I said, a closed system. You can give different symbols or different names for the numbers, but what they're pointing to is pretty concise.
I see.
And can't just be messed with. Like a 3 is a 3.
Yep.
And then when 3 is applied to something, then you can have understand your discussions, but then we're not dealing with the quantifier but that which is being quantified, and that is where you get the discussions about and whether 3 is applicable or not, but the 3 has not changed its meaning, nor will it.
Good point. Good point. This is always 3, no matter what I call it. It's still 1, 2, 3. I see.
So that's where you get with the tag, like, what is 3? Well, because the famous debate between Jay and Seven Coconuts, Molyneux.
Yeah, Molyneux. Yeah.
Your compatriot. And he just said, well, you just sort of count it. Is it?
Yeah.
Because that's more of that behaviorist type of thinking.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
But the problem with the primates that try to learn, they actually never learn any sentence structure. They never learn anything. What they learn is, hey, if I make this movement, I get food. Or I get some type of reward. They lack the nuances, and you have certain types of autism that really, really inhibit people's ability to abstract. So you can't explain that a stick man is like a human being.
Yes, good point.
Because how?
Yes. Yep.
If a stick man became 3D and started walking, you'd freak out.
I would.
There's just this orb of flesh carried by these like tiny legs, and it would be pretty horrifying. But what are they called? SPCs, is that what they call, like, those creepy pasta entities that you have to? It would be one of those.
Oh yeah. The NPCs.
It's like a internet subgenre of horror.
Yeah.
But it's representing a human being, and you can manipulate it. You can remember how famous those animations of like two stick men fighting were. Like 10 years ago.
Yep.
It was probably like a lot of animators doing like work or practice, if nothing else. You knew exactly what was going on.
Yeah.
But with anime is actually modeled after cats, like the face structure and stuff.
Oh, really? Oh, okay. Yeah.
I remember seeing it and freaked out.
I never thought
oh God, it's all furries.
Yeah, everywhere, man.
Furries all the way down.
Man, they programmed.
It's not turtles all the way down. It's furries in turtle costumes all the way down. But you know what's happening because you are dealing with it on a certain abstract level that we can't really get into. We can't break into it. It's so fundamental and so exclusively human that I know people love to say. Joe Rogan says, dolphins have like dialects.
Yeah.
No, not in the way humans have dialects.
No. Yeah.
So it's analogous, but you were saying it. I don't mind people saying it exactly because I have this ability to abstract. But it's a dolphin dialect, not a human dialect. Correct. It's not the same thing.
Correct.
As much as communication is not necessarily the same thing as language, because we have a whole category called nonverbal communications.
Absolutely.
And that breaks down into many, many things.
Yep.
But for example, these primates, they would never speak to themselves, which is a pretty important part of a child's development.
Good point.
They will start talking to themselves. They will start talking to their toys. They will sort of anthropomorphize them. It is basically like a muscle developing. So you've got these muscles in your hands, and your children will move them around sort of very, very, poorly, very disorientedly, but they're developing this experience of using this muscle.
Yes.
And it's simply the case that no being other than maybe angels, but no being on earth, material being, has this ability, has this muscle that we do.
Yes.
And that is why children develop it naturally.
This is a great point. Yes.
It is because they never expected a gorilla to, start being some masterful rhetorician, Demosthenes, is that how it's called in English?
Can you imagine if they did?
Demosthenes.
Demosthenes. Can you imagine that?
Yeah. But they would have to do it with sign language, so it would sound sort of like when feminists say you have to use jazz hands instead of clapping.
Yeah.
It would really take out the. I suppose they could also shout, or growl, whatever they do.
Actually, I think you're on a very good point here, because that is like the entry point of like why they call consciousness the hard problem, because it's the awareness of being aware. That level of awareness is something only humans have. They're aware of themselves being aware, and even to ask the question like, why am I thinking? Therefore, can I have a conversation with myself? That whole thing is a very, very uniquely human thing. And like you said, maybe angels or this and that, but on this realm, or whatever you want to call this, it's only us that has this, because we're created in the image of God, and that we're able to have this back and forth?
So I would like to say I do believe it's part of that, but I wouldn't, go via some strange route. We can speak because, the word of God or something. That tends to muddy the waters.
Yes.
So God definitely created us with this ability. I personally don't know of any church father who would make this point. If someone does and corrects me, I'm always happy to be corrected. But he gave us this ability, obviously, to be like a noetic entity, properly noetic. So not on the level of like angels again, because our minds, the nous, how we understand the nous, right? It's far more of a perceptive organ as compared to like the angels. But at the same time, we have this ability to, gain profundity with both our interactions with God and with each other. So there is a purpose to it. And if you said aware of being aware, that's one thing, because very few animals actually are aware even. They place them in front of a mirror. They just don't figure it out.
Yes.
And you have intelligent animals who do figure out that it's them in the reflection. They gather it, but it's we've never seen them go. There's an old Onion video of scientists teach a gorilla to have existential dread and fear of death.
Okay, I gotta look that up.
Oh, yeah, it's like, and then the old onion is masterful, and it's
Totally.
like these like scientists. So we kept showing like pictures of dead gorilla and showing you one day.
Yeah. I love it.
So
Falls apart.
yeah. So it develops like existential dread and anxiety, and
Walking around with a skull, philosophizing like Nietzsche.
so you know, it's that type of thing. But definitely, there are simply things we cannot reduce further.
Yes.
Not now, at least.
Yes.
Let's say. Who knows what the future might hold. Orthodox anthropology does not discount the body as some type of platonic, prison, that our souls are captured here and we will be free and orb.
Some sort of Gnostic retelling.
But
yes.
because that stems from this platonic teaching, not big fans of the ancient Greeks in general, not big fans of being trapped in a fleshy prison.
Yep.
Which is why we get in the scriptures, the resurrection is like ridiculous to the Greeks. Like, why would you go back?
Yeah.
They feel confused by the fact that you'd want to go back. But that's our anthropology, We don't see the body as a bad thing. And we would say, like, thinking does take the brain as well.
Yes, it does.
What type of temporary existence we have when we are separated, upon this death up until the day of resurrection, we don't know, right? And we're not physical. So people say, well, you can damage the part of the brain that changes the personality. Yeah, because that's part of your personality. We're not saying there's like software and hardware. Not exactly how it works.
That's right. Yep.
There's far more to it.
Yes.
And we are an integrated being that is, as a consequence of sin, broken for a while and separated. But that's why we say there will be a general resurrection. Things will be restored to where they were. And we also don't know what that's going to look like, because when the Lord resurrects, he sort of like walks through walls and stuff. So but he can also eat. So we don't know what this reality is like. We have intimations of how it's going to work, but we don't have this exact, how shall we say, description of it, like we don't have of a lot of things, which opens things up to speculation. Lots of it very strange, but very fun, and that tends to lead people astray. Like type in Nephilim in Google, see how much fun you'll have.
Oh yeah, I've been there. I did that.
I said that's how I first found Jay. So it can take a wild turn. The Lord uses strange are the works of the Lord.
Yeah, even the use of the word God and how it changes depending on how it's used. Sorry, I'm not trying to veer you off, but these are fantastic points. I mean, this is. It's funny because like spelling, like my background is Hermeticism, so even like looking at things from the my non-proper Orthodox background, there was always an emphasis on the idea and concept of casting a spell versus using symbolic little letters to make a spell and then spell a word. They're kind of interconnected in how it's viewed, and also how we dictate and create narratives around it, whether it's like a lot of the stuff you're mentioning, and which is why we have to come back to the metaphysical understanding of words. Sorry, I didn't mean to take it a different.
No. This is all connected to what we're talking about.
Yeah.
So, like a sigil, you're talking about, basically.
Sigils, yes. Well, words are sigils, technically speaking. I mean, that's what people forget.
And this is why we say iconography.
Yes.
It's not actually icon painting; it's icon writing.
Yes, iconography. Yes.
And in Serbian we say ikonopisanje, meaning writing.
Yes.
Right. So it's not just some fluke that's how you say it in Greek.
Yes.
Like in geography, it means earth writing.
Very good.
Which is, I think, one of the few words that when you translate it from Greek, it sounds cooler. Earth writing just sounds awesome.
Yeah, I guess it does. Yeah.
But a lot of things, sound cooler in Greek. I've also wondered, like, this is sort of connected, but it's more my question because you're Greek. You grew up speaking it like regularly.
Yes. I'm a little rusty, but yes, I did.
Okay, but I mean, you grew up with it, and it's like
it was my first
within
language.
family circles and stuff. Okay, yeah. So I was always thinking, like, do you find most words to sound mundane that are from Greek? Like nephrology, do you just hear kidney science?
Yeah, it's a combination of both. It's like the poetry of it is taken away, but it also breaks down the word. I see what you like when I hear it in Greek. It's like I'm not trying to be cheesy, but it has an energy to it. When I hear it in English, I hear it more for like reading a textbook or a manual. It kind of sounds that way, rather than Greek. It has like you don't think about it. It has this poetry.
Right.
To it.
It goes directly to the meaning, as I talked about earlier.
Exactly.
So you've separated like the Greek from because I always thought like Milky Way galaxy.
Right.
The Milky Way.
Galactic, yeah, it's weird because if you say it in Greek, it's exactly that, the Milky Way. It doesn't make any sense.
Or galaxy thing.
Right. Also, I'm from Cyprus. My dad's from Cyprus, which is a little bit extra layer because in Cyprus they still use ancient Greek words. Well, they did up until recent times. So, like, for example, you wouldn't say kota, which is not a Greek word for chicken. That's from the cotoletta, whatever, from Italian. We would say ornitha in Cyprus, which is like ornithology, right? You wouldn't call it a kota. Yeah. Or like a door, you wouldn't call it a porta. That's Italian, right? In modern Greek, you would say thira in Cyprus. And a good example would be like parathiro, which is a window, is para these thiras. It's next to the door because back in the day it would be so. Like I only think of those things when I kind of stop to think about it, or I hear it from Greek to Cypriot.
Otherwise, it's just automized, basically.
Exactly.
It's sort of like how you would move your fingers. You're not thinking I'm sending a bioelectrical impulse.
Exactly.
I get it.
Exactly. Like parathiro is probably one of the best examples because if you say that to a Greek person, they wouldn't even think that it comes from para tis thiras. It's next to the door. They wouldn't think that.
Okay. I'll remember that example and use it a lot.
To my dad. That's my dad. Credit to my dad. My dad loved to do this my whole life.
Oh yeah. That must have been a huge flex. Like coming back to mainland Greece and like, you bloody Italian wannabes.
Exactly. Totally. 100%. 100%.
But they will tell him, well, you went to Toronto, so joke's on you.
That's true. That is true. That is so true. That's so true.
I'm thinking of types of discussions people have with people who move abroad in Serbia.
Although sometimes the diaspora, there's another one of those words. A lot of the diaspora will maintain like an era, like they'll take like a snapshot. So like the Greeks that moved, you know what I mean? And then they go back to Greece and they're like, yo, this isn't Greek. Like what's going on here? And they're like, yeah, because you left in the late 70s or the whatever, right?
There are plenty of stories of that, like royalty that fled France, and OI in French is pronounced wa, so MOI, moi. But we have indicators that it was pronounced mouais.
Oh,
so you had like the royalty that had to flee for a while, and then when they came back, like the language sort of shifted, and now they're pronouncing things weird. Because yes, exactly, you sort of calcify things, and then they move away. Here's an example in English. The English word challenge is no longer fell out of use in France. To translate the word challenge into French, you would say défi. So not even similar.
Okay.
But it comes from this, from the Norman conquests, obviously, and most English words are of French origin for this very reason, because the nobles were all French, right? The peasantry spoke English. King Richard the Lionheart didn't speak English. he wrote his famous poem in 2 different types of French.
Okay, 2 different types. Okay.
Yeah, you had like the northern one and the southern one, and
I see.
called Languedoc and Languedoc,
Okay.
which is how you would say yes. So they didn't call it that back in the day, but it's sort of like retroactively called that from like categorization, and he did in both, and he spent almost his entire life, away from England. But he's like one of their favorite monarchs because of all of his glorious achievements, to be fair, in the Third Crusade. But then you have, in Old French, it would say challenge. That completely disappeared. If it had stayed as in usage, but the phonetics changed, it would be challenge in modern.
Yeah.
But it just fell out of use. And now just have défi. And then the funny part is when you have the cinnamon challenge, they would say cinnamon challenge.
Okay.
So it came back from English into French in a form that was more French in the ancient, closer to ancient, Old French, than what they have now.
Okay, I see
Because
that.
in France, French is like a living thing.
Right.
But when you sort of break off a piece of a language or take a snapshot of a language, like you mentioned with immigrants, like they are no longer participating in the general, states and influences that are active in the homeland. So things like that are very, very strange. I mean, if my name would be Saba, if we didn't receive it, actually, if, like Slavs received the faith a couple of centuries earlier. Because in Greek is S.O.S.
Yes, but
right, it's an Aramaic
originally, right? Yeah,
and in Aramaic it's with a B.
With a ba, yeah, because the V in Greek would be a b, like a v. Sorry, a v sound, like vita. A B is a v sound in Greek.
Yeah, so everyone knows alpha, beta, and that's what because that's what you would have in ancient Greek.
Yeah.
But you have this phonetic shift, which happens all the time in all sorts of languages.
Yes.
English included. So people who find it strange, it's just because you haven't studied the history of your own language.
Yeah.
It's a very common occurrence. Sometimes it's foreign influence. Sometimes there's just organic shift. Sometimes a certain dialect becomes dominant. Like if for some reason...
And translations too sometimes. Like for example, sorry to interrupt you, just like an easy one to see, which isn't exactly the same, but it's like in Greek, the H is not a H sound, it's an E sound, right? So you would say historia, but when you look at it written in Greek, it has an H there, so they say history. But in Greek, it would be historia, it wouldn't be history.
There's a difference there, actually.
Okay.
So you have the letter chi, which is like an X.
Yeah.
And that is an H sound in modern.
Yeah, the X is a H. Yeah.
Yes, Christos.
Yes, exactly.
But in like classical Greek, it would be a Ch.
Yes, it would, yes.
That is why the Latins transliterate that or render that as a CH, because what we would call an aspirated K. So it's like a K that you don't fully, there are types of consonants you produce by creating a full, how shall we say, a full, I know the word in Serbian, just keep like a barrier.
Okay.
A full barrier, and then you produce it upon the release. So like a
I see.
So it's an explosive type of consonant.
Okay.
But an aspirated one is where you don't fully close it and you just keep producing it. So it's you don't say K, you just go.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That's why theta is spelled as a TH. You don't fully close it and you go.
Yep.
You see, you have a DH like would be in modern Greek delta, but in this is something that has completely disappeared from modern Greek, if you haven't studied like older forms of Greek, like you would in Koine Greek, or in you would call it Kini, right?
Yep. Yeah, pretty good, dude.
But you had like I forgot the name of it. Like those signs, you would have a special sign at the beginning of every Greek word,
Tono.
like an apostrophe.
Yeah, tono. Yeah.
Yeah, and it nowadays it's merely like a remnant. But in older forms of Greek, it would either be arched to the right or to the left.
Yeah.
So if it goes arching towards nowadays, it's always arching towards the right.
Yes. Yeah. It is.
But it was a difference back then. And if it arches towards the left, it would be an H sound at the beginning.
I didn't know that.
That's why hyper and hypo have an H.
Yes.
But you wouldn't have spelled it with a chi, with a hi.
Oh, yeah.
Because back in those days, that would be hypo. But it's not a hypo, it's a hypo.
Yeah.
Hypo.
Ipo.
Like an ypsilon was an u.
Yes, that's a good point.
Yeah, that was
Like hippopotamus, hippopotamos, hippo.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah. I never thought about that.
Hyper, etc.
Okay. Yeah.
Hyperagia theotokisosonimas.
Look at this guy.
So you would say hyperagia, and let me try and convert it into like a classical hyperagia.
Hyperagia. Okay.
Sorry, no, it wouldn't be hyperagia. I don't know why I thought it was an epsilon iota, but you had that special sign, and that would be the H that exists. Also, in words like, sorry for for the example, but diarrhea, why it's spelled with RRH.
Okay, why?
And RH is sort of like an English R.
Diarhea. Oh, yeah, because in Greek you would say diarhea.
Yeah, but because you've lost that whole process of aspirating.
Okay.
Languages tend to simplify over times. I keep telling people when you're studying Greek, modern Greek, you will start feeling like someone's messing with you because there are 5 ways of spelling the sound E.
Yes, yeah.
Iota, ypsilon, what's it? Ita, and then epsilon, and omicron. Epsilon, iota, and omicron, iota.
Omicron, iota, yeah. Depending on how you use it, whether it's like plural, whether yeah. That's so true.
It's all E, and then when you have to remember how to spell something, you're like, well, which one of those was it?
Yes. I suck at grammar, so when I was learning Greek, everything was just an E, like a iota, everything.
Oh yeah, see, that's one way to handle it. But if you were living in Greece, that would become a problem.
Oh, huge problem.
It would be like in Japanese if you didn't know the kanji and you only knew the hiragana and the katakana. So you can technically do it, but people would think of you as a simpleton.
Oh, right away. They still do. Yeah, they do.
Fair enough. But that's something I would like to impart on you, because you have these. Greek is a very ancient language, and it's undergone substantial changes.
Yes, it has.
But there are remnants of it, and like we talked about, when the Romans first interacted with them, they were trying to adapt, what they were hearing. So the chi, as I said, or the hi, was pronounced as a ch, which is why they spelled it as a ch. And why? That's how you spell in most Western languages Christ with a ch.
Okay.
Because that's how the Romans adapted it. They would pronounce it as a k.
Right.
And why in modern day English still, other languages have veered off, but English tends to retain spelling even from original languages.
Yep.
they don't try to force it into something else like the Italians or the French. But if a word is spelled with a ch but which is pronounced as a k, it's a word of Greek origin.
That's true.
Like character,
for the
chronology.
For the audience, that's why you have the hero for Christos. In Greek, it would be an X. It would be an X, just for the audience to know.
And a ro going through it,
which is a P in English.
Yeah, a P. And then all of a sudden, I don't know if you saw my stream with Jay Dyer.
I did about that was a great stream.
So I spelled out like in Latin letter H, which in Greek would be an eta. But then for us who use the Cyrillic script, it's an N.
Man, reading Cyrillic, it trips me out, dude, because I can kind of like get it, and then like my Serbian,
because of the Greek,
right? And my Serbian friends they'd be like, "Watch this, watch this." I remember going over there for Pascha once because I would do my Pascha, and then I would go to my Serbian friends' houses. You know what I mean? And because different food, of course, I gotta get all of it, right? And then they'd be like, "Here, watch this," and they would hand me something like, "Go ahead, read this," and they would just sit there snickering. I was like, "Come on, man," because it's like I'm like, "This is like bastardized Greek, dude. What the hell are you saying here?"
Yeah, and I can explain to people why these changes happen because they have a logic to them. But when all you're left with are finished products,
yes,
it seems random.
True, because the Cyrillic alphabet.
Cyril and Methodius, in English. We call them Cyrilo y Metodio.
Yes, Methodios. Cyrilos and Methodios. Yes.
Yeah. So. And actually, not invented by Saint Cyril, invented by his students who named it after him.
Oh, really? Okay, I didn't know that. Okay.
Saint Cyril and Methodius invented what we call the glagolitic or glagolits.
Okay.
We say glagolica. So if you want to look it up, it's a very cool-looking script, but people are like, this is a bit.
What's it called? Sorry, let me write that down.
GLA.
Yep.
GOL. IT.
Yep.
IC. Glagolitic.
Okay, I'm gonna look that up.
So that's the easiest way to spell it, and you will see it looks pretty cool. But people like, why is it so different from everything else? It's just going to be confusing. So their students.
That makes sense.
Clement and Naomius.
To simplify it pretty much, right?
They created like a different type of Greek. So they created a Greek adapted for Slavic. Were like phonemes.
Okay.
So we have a B and a V, and our V is like the Greek vita, but then we have a different letter, which is a B, because we need both.
Oh, right.
In Greek, because it was organic, like all of your like Basileus, Vasilevs, so it just shifted all the pronunciations. So there's now when you want to say a B, you use an like an MP basically, like a banana would be a
MP,
me P, me P. Not the best thing to say in English, but
I just clicked it. See, right there's a good example. I had to translate it from Greek to English to get your joke.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, so, what's so funny? That is how it. Oh, me P. Gotcha.
Yeah. With enough time, you literally start seeming a bit mad even to yourself. I promise you, it's fun.
Yeah.
But you do get concerned. Like, am I losing it?
I think it's beautiful, man. It's an exercise in consciousness, brother. That's all it is.
Pretty much. But not the best of jokes at parties.
At my party, you're always welcome to tell those jokes at my party.
Yeah, if it's a nerdy enough party, it will crush. But otherwise, don't go to the laity and start using them.
Sava comes in, mic drop, boom, I'm out. In a geek party, everyone loses it.
And I mentioned to you, I like rebetiko.
Yes.
Because I am guessing a bouzouki would be a bit expensive to get, and it's one of those things like with double.
I started with a bouzouki,
strings.
by the way.
Oh,
I started with a bouzouki. That was my first instrument.
I actually use the ukulele as like a replacement bouzouki.
Yeah, it does work. It does work. It does have the similar tone, but it's still a bit different. Like even here in Mexico, they have.
Is that a six-stringed ukulele?
It certainly is, sir. It's basically
Never knew they had those.
It's a guitar with the capo on, I think, the fifth fret, I think. Something like that.
So it's a guitar.
Yeah, it's pretty much a guitar with the capo at the fifth, I think.
Okay, so it's like a shortened guitar because if you play the ukulele, like the top string is actually higher than the one after it, which makes for very strange chords, and it's really counterintuitive if you play the guitar.
Well, because the bouzouki originally was tuned, if I'm not mistaken, D, G, D, something like that. The original triojo, really? It had three strings. Then a Greek
they
bouzouki.
Doubled them.
Yeah, Greek. Well, they were all doubled, but there would be like 3 pairs of 2 originally, and then later I think it was Manos Kazidakis. I think my dad's watching this; he's gonna get upset if I got it wrong. I think it was him who added the fourth set, and then they kind of tuned it differently. They tuned it like kind of like the bottom or the top 4 strings of a guitar.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Never played it, but I like it. Like our pop music is pretty Greek sounding, a lot of it at least.
I play a lot of Serbian music, by the way, on S.O.S radio. I play a lot of Balkan gypsy folk punk, and then Jim Bob. Shout out to Jim Bob. He was shouting at us on one of his streams. He's like, "Yeah, at S.O.S radio, he plays like obscure weird punk," and then he's like, obscure weird accordion punk.
Yeah,
that's true. That's true.
Story of my music growing up.
Yeah, he nailed it. I was like, yeah.
So I'm aware of it, but I remember using that, and it's pretty good. There are some times where, like the Greek understanding of music isn't. Is often veers off from modern sensibilities. And what we're accustomed to, and it sounds very disharmonic and stuff.
So. Yes.
So and you can hear that from a lot of like hymns. If they're in line with modern sensibilities, it's one of the best things ever. Mm-hmm. And then if they're not, it's just weird.
It's true because like on that note. And then like this helps with the Cradle Orthodox side of things. Like when I grew up going to Greek Orthodox churches, obviously, so I was used to the Byzantine style chant. The first time I went to a Russian church, because it's funny because I'd gone to a Serbian church before. After that, and to me, it was like it was Byzantine-ish. With a little bit of a flavor, and I was like, oh, okay, that they just added their own little thing. But then I went to a Russian church, and I'm like, whoa, this almost sounds Latin. There wasn't like there wasn't any of the bends. It was more like and I was confused. I was like, what is this? Like, is this like Catholic Orthodox? Like, I was so confused.
Just to be clear, a lot of those extended things were because the priests would need time to do something.
Okay, yes. That's
because it's not just made for concerts.
That's so true.
So if you finish up and the priest is halfway through, it's like, what do I do now?
So true. That's so true.
I'll have to find you some like proper medieval Serbian compositions.
Please do.
Because they will sound different to Byzantine. And it's a pretty unique thing. But too difficult, very prohibitively difficult.
Mimic it, because the Serbian churches I'd heard, it sounded
it's pretty. I mean, a lot of them, like you have a Kyrie eleison, and they will just switch between Kyrie eleison, and then go Gospodi pomiluj, Gospod. It will, but I can't mimic like the old ones.
Is it very different? Because what you just did there to me is very Byzantine, right? And
yeah,
it's not what the Russians
that's like
do.
a modern thing. And then you have what's called the znameni chant, and it's not exactly Western. And there's a whole way of writing it. There's a whole way of. I'll send that to you as well, so you can look into it, because you're a musician.
Please.
But it's they tend to go for like not polyphonic, I suppose. Dephonic is polyphonic because it's more than one. But it's a pretty simple scale. But then the matchings go very, very much more like what you're used to in like Western music.
They'll bend it. They'll bend the note. Is that kind of what you mean?
No, they don't bend a lot. That's more the case with Greek.
Yeah, we do a lot of that.
Very extended, very... They go for harmony. You know that in
some people. Because when I was in Texas, I went to Texas a little while ago. We were working on this project, and they're very Kievian, I guess. I've never heard that term. The first time I heard it was their style. And the priest there, God bless Father Justin, I love him, I adore him. But he was saying, like, who's got time for that Byzantine chant? Because they'll like hold the note forever. Kyrie eleison.
And just to be clear, it's very hard to get a good Byzantine choir.
Yes,
it's very easy to get wrong.
It's so true. Because you see, going back to Rebetica, there's a lot of early Rebetica. It was those church scales. Combined with some of the Islamic style stuff from the Turks, but not exactly, because that's what they don't like to hear. They don't like to hear that a lot of it came from the Byzantine chants, and then they took it over and they extended the note. But there's a lot of early like Rebetica where it sounds straight up like church music, and you almost wonder, am I being blasphemous here? Because they're talking about subject matter that wouldn't fit in the church. Like, so they got
but that's where you get a lot of music. You get it from church music.
Exactly.
In the West as well.
Exactly.
But then you get particular flavors, obviously, with the sensibilities of the local populace. A lot of us are so accustomed to like Italian and German because that's where the majority of famous composers are from.
True.
And that's why a lot of things sound foreign to us. So a lot of people think of Byzantine as this sounds like Arabic or Turkish, like sort of the other way around.
Yes.
But that you think that until you hear proper like Turkish or Arabic music, and all of a sudden it doesn't sound the same. So compared to Western music, it would sound more Arabic, but I assume that to the Arabs it sounds more Western because it's like in between.
Yes.
So yeah, it's fun. I love like music theory and stuff. I hate jazz.
I don't know any music theory technically. I just know how to do it. But I know exactly what you mean about jazz.
Okay, so you do it by talent. Yeah, I don't have a lot of talent per se. It was mostly an intellectual journey. I can replicate things. I was singing in choirs since there was an opportunity to sing in choirs, before even my voice dropped. So like third grade. Then it took and then imagine like 1 year we're singing children's songs. The next time I sound like a pedophile.
That's awesome.
Because it happened like in a couple of months, and very, very strange experience to have because of the level of. I had a regular like a male child voice.
Yeah.
Like I didn't have a deep child voice.
Yeah.
And then it dropped into for the same amount. No, it dropped just precipitously. Like a weight was attached to it.
That's awesome.
Christ.
That's awesome.
But yeah. What were we talking about?
we bounced all over the place, but before we end this, because we did, but we didn't. Like if we actually we were bouncing, but in a very linear way, sort of. It was cool because we kind of tied a lot of concepts. Tangential, yes. We connected a lot of concepts, which brings me to because it fits really well with where we've gone, everything we've said. Being Cradle, myself as well. And then seeing the difference between converts, I can usually even tell, okay, this guy is a convert from Roman Catholicism, or this guy is a Protestant by their approach on how they're having the conversation with me. And even like the referencing of like the Septuagint versus the Masoretic text, like you could see like even the referencing or even like Bible quoting, because like I know back home, in Cyprus, you wouldn't do that. Like I remember my grandfather saying, you don't read the little like John this and that. You have to read it. Like they'd almost get angry at you. They're like, you can't just pick and choose what you want, man. So like all
that's
of these
why
concepts,
we don't know references by heart as much as Protestants, which is a shame.
Yes.
Yes. But at the same time, they misuse it, at least as far as.
So hold on, before anyone gets offended, let me set this up proper, because I don't mean it in an offensive way. I've learned a lot of things from my convert brothers and sisters, for sure.
Oh, yeah.
I have learned a lot from my Protestant convert brothers and sisters, areas where the cradles kind of fall short. But at the same time, there's the reversal too. So when I'm watching debating the way it's done, like when I watch you debate, there's a huge difference the way you debate versus others, because I could tell, okay, this guy is Cradle Orthodox, like some of the referencing, you know what I mean, doesn't. So go into like the differences, pros and cons, especially because, and then another thing I just want to say before anyone gets offended, some people think, because I've said not everybody should be debating, not everybody should be doing apologetics. And the reason why I say that is like, I think it takes like you need to fine tune your weapons here. You know what I mean? Like yourself, Jay Dyer, David Patrick Harry, Jim Bob, fantastic job at debating. But then I watch some other guys jumping in there and I'm like, you're kind of pushing people away. You're very legalistic in your approach, overly philosophical. Can I get you to go into some of this?
Also, there's unfortunately, it's very difficult to understand this point because you have to have very, very deep ability to introspect. There's a massive difference between understanding something to the point that it makes sense to you and then being able to project that. I constantly struggle with this. My mind works in a very tangential manner, sort of exemplified by the way the conversation was going up until earlier. But that makes for very poor didactics. I remember I was helping people with exams and stuff. They're like, "What are you doing?" I thought I was making like point after point after point, like this person is gonna nail it, and they are looking at me like I'm making fun of them or something, like I'm intentionally sabotaging their study. But it makes perfect sense to me. So that's why. That's one thing people should really think about before going into debates. Do I know how to project this? Or is it simply, I know it makes sense to me? Two very separate skills. Some people with less knowledge about linguistics than myself, or even with like a specific language, would demolish me as far as how well they can teach, because they know how to impart it. So beware of that one. As far as talking about Cradle versus a convert, I remember the first time I was just starting to engage, as I mentioned, with Orthodoxy online in the English-speaking world. And I remember someone said, "You are Orthodox, you guys teach works-based salvation." I was like, "What does that mean?" So you believe you earn your salvation? Like, not really. But we believe we, work and, to be faithful to God. Well, yes, that's what you are teaching, works-based salvation. That didn't make sense to me. Couldn't register it.
Yep, me too. And
it took me a while to realize that they separate physical and mental activities, which seems very, crypto-manichean, as I think Jay put it, very well put, because sort of like a difference between spiritual material. I don't understand why, but then I did understand why. Because they see faith as a mental activity, and then works as a physical activity, whereas we don't. We see faith as living a life of faithfulness, and then works are sort of things you think you can do, like strike deals with God or something.
The way I like to see it is we look at it as being a good servant rather than being a good philosopher.
That's a good way of putting it, but also in the pagan sense, like you would approach a deity with like an offer. And I summarize it basically in the story of Abraham. He went to sacrifice Isaac as part of faithfulness. He didn't initiate it. He didn't say, "Hey, God, what if I sacrifice this kid over here?" Winking. Like that would be works. That's like I'm doing something to earn something. Whereas we're doing what God would want of us. That's faith. It's not mental processes.
Yes.
But as far as converts are concerned, they had to break out of that mindset. So they took routes, sort of. They quote scriptures that you have to quote such scriptures back to an extent. You have to, because I can quote the saints all I want. They're saying, well, who cares about some weird guy with a beard, in a monastery somewhere in Siberia?
Yeah.
I care about what the apostles said and the prophets said.
Right.
Okay. So, but then I think of it, I try to summarize it as their minimal unit of theological exchange is a verse, which is a smaller one than we're dealing with. For us, it's a concept.
Yes.
We can't go into a single verse.
Yes.
And if you study linguistics, or if you've studied not necessarily linguistics themselves, but the topic, how words are used, Father Josiah Trenham makes this point excellently, paradosis. Is because when it's translated as teaching, it has a positive connotation. When it's used in a negative connotation, it's translated as tradition. But it's the same word in Greek.
Yes, paradosis. See, yeah.
Because technically, teaching and tradition, not necessarily separate things.
Yeah, because even if para next to the dosis, the giving.
You shouldn't. Again, you shouldn't go via the etymological routes. That's again not how things work.
Okay, good point. Good point. You caught me there. I like that.
Yeah, like saying hypostasis, like to stand under, right?
Yeah.
But it does translated into understanding, and all of a sudden you would end up back in that medical.
True. Good point. Yeah.
So don't do that. But as I'm quoted often as no. That happened once, and it still is used to this day, which is hilarious to me.
It is good.
But again, it's like a teaching and a tradition. Like I don't know if people know this, but traditions aren't genetically inherited; they're taught.
Yes.
So it's like an apprenticeship. The way you're taught how to behave, how to think, etc. But that's an editorial decision, how to translate one word. And then if you don't go into Greek, and you're left only with the finished product, the English, and Greek, again, not easy to get into, let alone like a first century form of Greek.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So even most Greeks would really struggle with that. It's similar to how we Slavic peoples, we listen to Church Slavonic, and it makes sense. And all of a sudden, I have no idea where that went. So it seems like you would imagine in the original different words are used, but they're not. And translation is interpretation, because different languages operate differently. There are different nuances of them. And that's why we might struggle to translate a certain word in Greek not back into English, but into English.
Yep.
But then not if you've got a couple of options to translate into, you have to make a choice. And it seems like in ancient Greece, it was a pastime to invent words for basically no reason whatsoever. 15 or door or window. But it's probably the reason why God chose Greek as the language of evangelizing, because it has these exact nuances which are certainly lacking in Hebrew.
Yep.
Hebrew was partly reconstructed through Greek, actually.
Yes, it was a dead language for many years. People don't realize that.
Yeah, Hebrew already, like with the Babylonian exile, became sort of what Latin is to Italians.
Yeah, yep.
Italian Roman Catholics, right?
Even Jewish people don't realize that the reason why the Septuagint should be of value to them is because that's how they translated some of the words into modern because it was a dead language for so long, and they don't like the Septuagint for obvious reasons, but also that's how they got their language back. It's so weird.
Because Greek records its vowels.
Yes. Yeah.
And Semitic languages didn't. That's a medieval innovation. To add all the diacritical marks and like dots and dashes and stuff.
Yes.
So you didn't have that, and then you even get a problem because it didn't have vowels. Sometimes a word is used intentionally because you can vocalize it. That is to say, add these vowels and get a different meaning. So when you talk about like Satan, sorry, I mean Satan, but like the term serpent, depending on how you vocalize it, it can mean snake/serpent. It can mean the shining one or the deceiver.
Like seraphim, like the difference between seraphim and stuff. Is that what you mean?
No. Seraphim is like from Egyptian seraph, which means a serpent. But for them, like serpent, for the Egyptians, a serpent was like a guardian entity for the pharaoh, which is why he had one on top of his cool hat. Yes. I mean, the pharaoh's crown, for lack of a better word, is like the cape of the cobra.
Yes,
and then it has a snake on top, and then his throne will be just filled with a serpentine imagery.
Okay, sorry, so I didn't mean to veer you off there. Keep going. Shiny ones.
Right. So depending on which vowels you add to those consonants, you can have these three meanings. But because you didn't have the vowels, it's used intentionally to show you that it can be read in these three ways. So it retains a multiplicity.
It lets you know that you have to figure out which way it's meant.
No, it can mean all three at the same time.
Oh, okay.
So the most common usage of those consonants is just snake. But because it has this connotation, I'm saying you have a certain mindset when you're writing just the consonants. And then, but if you're writing consonants and vowels, you would have to pick one of those.
I see. Okay.
So when an innovation comes, you have to make editorial decisions. The only way to rectify that is like a footnote. So you say this can also mean so and so, but if you're writing the vowels, you're losing the other options. You've chosen one.
I see. Okay.
So that's again just how language works. But back to the prottery at hand. These people are bringing themselves out of this legalistic mindset, this so-called sola scriptura mindset, but they're operating already from a pretty chosen sets of words and translations. I'm not even impugning any, or attributing any malice. Like someone is trying to deceive. Like they could have been completely honest.
Of course.
There's no shortage of even with Greek translations where they make mistakes.
Of course, yes, of course.
Like the Codex Sinaiticus has certain mistakes. People know, and they've corrected them throughout time. It's simply that with greater knowledge comes greater precision. But we are not sola scripturists. That is why no one freaks out over a translation. Because we don't see that as how the church operates. This artifact theory, which is funny because, we're the ones with the wailing chants and like bowing and beards, but it's the Protestants who actually think more like Muslims do.
That is such a good point. Yes.
But Muslims openly have this idea, like the Quran is direct revelation. It's quoting Allah.
Right.
Directly.
Right.
It's not like, oh, this is a message. I mean, it is a message, but like there's an intermediary, but it's quotes. It's like receiving a letter from someone. Correct. If you wrote me a letter, those are your words.
Yes.
There was no one in between to sort of, well, this is the general gist of what he meant, and then gave that to me. No, so they have to go with that. But you see, the prots sort of have the same mindset, because it is necessary for sola scriptura to operate, properly, and it doesn't. And then you have this sort of confusion internally.
Yeah. I see. Sorry to interrupt you there, because that's a really good point. Because I knew, so when I first got into all this stuff, I walked into Christianity having already an Orthodox, concept, but a lot of my ideas of Christianity, because I grew up in Canada, were filtered through Roman Catholicism and Protestantism without even knowing or realizing it. Like, for example, when I was given the Orthodox example of the church as a hospital or hell, the description of it, I already had a preconceived notion.
It sounds weird.
it totally sounds weird. And I was like, what do you mean a hospital? And then as soon as I saw that was actually one of the reasons I started flipping, going, okay, there's something more to this orthodoxy than I realized. Also, the concept of hell being like kind of in the presence of God, and you hate him so much, that is a hell. I was like, what? That's a whole different way of seeing it, rather than like the way that the
they will call you like a philosophizer,
right? When in fact it's the other way around, and that's the part that confused me, because the sola scriptura,
they have the more pagan thinking, actually,
way more so. Sola scriptura, sola fide, all of these things, they're not in my head. I had to learn them after the fact. So what you're saying makes sense, because they're walking in as converts with this already pre-embedded in their head. And even the way they play with words like judgment or like all this stuff, I'm like, well, what are you talking about? Christ is overthrowing tables. Turn the other cheek doesn't mean the way you take it. Or I didn't come here to bring peace. I came here to bring a sword. It contradicts some of the ways that they're like quote mining.
Just to be clear, that like that turning of the cheek, that has a lot to do with Romans, because they would slap you around, which is incredibly Italian.
Yeah, it's so Italian. Yeah. And Saint Nicholas, of course.
No,
sorry,
it wasn't Saint Nicholas. No, wait, it was Saint Nicholas, but it wasn't an Arian. It wasn't Arius he slapped, but an Arian.
Right. But we're getting close to Christmas. I thought I'd throw that in there.
Oh, that's not him in the background.
No, that's Vladika Dimitri. He's not a saint as of yet of the south of Dallas.
I now see the lack of the halo.
Yeah, there's no halo, just the outline. Soon to be saint.
So you're part of the Greek church, right?
I am, but because I'm involved at this project that I'm trying to do between Texas and Mexico, it just turned out coincidentally or providentially enough that Vladika Dimitri, who's now reposed, that was literally his plan, his outline as well. And it was also mine without knowing who he was. So a couple of listeners were like, yo, you need to come to Texas. Here's Vladika. Vladika Dimitri had similar, because he brought Orthodoxy. He helped flourish that in Mexico here. Long story. So, which is why when I went there, it was given to me kind of like, I think Vladika, is looking out for you. I don't know if that's necessarily the case. I'm not comfortable with saying.
Well, God willing.
Yes, God willing. Absolutely.
I'm asking, but it's still Greek, right? I mean, Dimitri, not exactly.
Dimitri, yeah, it is.
But you attend a Greek parish.
I attend no parish here in Mexico because there wasn't one near.
Okay. I'm asking because if you're Greek, so Saint Nicholas would be like the 2nd of December, right?
Yes. So we would have Io Vasili, Saint Basil, representing the holidays.
I believe if you type in Santa Claus English to Greek in Google Translate, it will translate it as
Io Vasilis.
Vasilius.
That's right. Yeah, because Saint Nicholas is isn't it the 15th, November 15th or December? I
19th for us, or old calendarists who are cooler than you.
No argument there. No argument there. I'm for that.
I'm not serious.
No, but I am because like we have a bad reputation, Greeks, because we tend to become a little bit more liberal than everybody else. You know what I'm saying? I'm not of that ilk. I'm very much, metropolitan neophytos of Morphu style. That's my style. That's my style. That's my grandfather's era. Anyway, sorry, we veered off.
No, I get it. It was just, we mentioned Saint Nicholas, and he is the most commonly celebrated Slava in Serbia.
Okay. Okay.
So, yeah. Okay. Well, it turns out when he was the patron saint of travelers and you're a wonder worker and everything, like people really appreciated, especially back in the day. Travel is now more like a nuisance to people. Back in the day, it was a very, very dangerous thing to do. So they appreciated the patron saint of,
very true.
Of travelers.
Every taxi cab I got into, when there's a Saint Nicholas, I'm like, are you Russian? Are you Serbian? Are you, right away.
I'm someone who doesn't want to get into a car accident. Ethnically. We're in full preparation. Like, this is the holiday season for us as well.
Yes.
We just had Saints Cosmas and Damien and Archangel Michael and Saint Sava's Day, my namesake day, is like on the 27th of January, and that's where it sort of eases off back into like normal times. But the winter is just full of pretty important feast days. Obviously, Christmas.
It's kind of important.
Yeah,
kind of important.
So that's what I think. Back to the Protestant converts, like, they need to shed this more and more, but also the way you think isn't like it's hard for me to shake off an Orthodox way of thinking. So if I became a Protestant, granted, Protestantism, boasts its simplicity. I think wrongfully so, but at least soteriologically speaking, if you just accept it as is stated, then it's pretty simple. So the rest is sort of like more for, I shouldn't say fun, that's rather condescending, but for like personal interest.
You wouldn't be wrong, though. You wouldn't be wrong.
I'm trying to be diplomatic.
Well, let's call a spade in this case, because worship music for them is fun.
And they had Bach.
That's a good point. That's a good point.
The problem is anything that is viewed as like a commodity will tend towards some type of blandness, like sort of what happened with pop music. Like, what was pop? I mean, there was a lot of pretty horrible pop music back in the 70s and 80s, but the pop music that was also pretty popular was, complex. It had interesting rhythms. It had interesting, harmonies and stuff. And nowadays, it's just almost. I'm thinking more and more. It is actually AI generated, but
it is.
But even before this AI generation, like, it might as well have been.
Very good point.
So that's what sort of happens. Even like in the. I believe Abide With Me is like from the 19th century, maybe the 18th. But then you listen to like the lyrics of it, like, Abide with me, fast comes the eventide. I can't think of it without singing it. Eventide, the darkness deepens, Lord with me abide.
Yeah.
The text is sort of like, the English is beautiful, but like the text is already emotional. Like, when you listen to Orthodox or Catholic hymns, they're full of theology.
Yes.
And the teaching of the church and stuff. But these are already emotional, and Abide With Me is one of the most famous. It's an Anglican hymn. It's one of the most famous and, again, beautifully written, but it might as well have been like a 4-chord
That's a good point.
guitar song.
That's a good point.
And that's unfortunately the tendency. It becomes bland. It lacks the rigidity provided by its purpose to maintain itself. Unfortunately, the Catholics have also veered into this, especially in South America. Like the things I've seen them do in South America.
Even from the start of Catholicism, even like when you sorry to interrupt you there, even when you look at some of their like Michelangelo and stuff like that, they have a complexity of aesthetics. I know it's not biblical, but I'm just saying they went towards a complexity of aesthetics rather than a complexity of symbolism and meaning. Whereas in like if you look at like Orthodox iconography, it's steeped in complexity of meaning and that kind of thing. Even the concept
and
of
regulated by the Seventh Ecumenical Council.
Correct. Yes.
So we're trying to abide by. That's why it keeps seeming like the things we get in Anglicanism and Lutheranism are sort of like this thing that exists in Catholicism but is still kept at bay by tradition.
Good point.
Just when the tradition broke, you see it sort of go naturally into, the Holy Spirit is a dove, and you can represent Christ as a lamb, which is explicitly forbidden. In iconography. And here's a small piece of information. Like the Holy Spirit does not take form of a dove. His descent is described as like that of a dove.
Oh.
That is why iconographically the only canonical way to represent the Holy Spirit as a dove is on in the baptism of Christ.
Right.
That's the only other way to represent him hypostatically is the flaming tongues on Pentecost.
So how is it described during the baptism? Is it described as a because it's been a while since I've read that.
The descent he descended as a dove.
Descended as a dove. Oh, okay.
But that's not he descended in the form of a dove.
Right.
Now it is represented iconographically, but that's because you have a still picture.
Yes.
You have to somehow represent it.
You can't just put floating things.
Yeah, unless you know, like Shadow, like in some anime move.
Right.
But then people will start, wait, are there multiple Holy Spirits? So you will be causing additional confusion then.
Dude, that's pretty cool. I didn't know that. Okay. Oh, that's
that's I'm not well versed in iconographic studies, but I do pick things up as I listen about it. I'm like what we call in Serbia an anti-talent for visual arts, including my penmanship, which I can barely read myself.
I'm with you on that. I'm with you on that.
So people who do have it tend to, out of interest and experience, tend to develop more of an interest. So people who like to paint or write icons, they will obviously read about it. They want to go and
for sure.
Create an uncanonical icon. But to say something about Roman Catholic converts, much easier transition in many ways than Protestants, because there's structure, there is much of it you're already used to.
Yes.
So easier to go from like a podium where people, give sermons and interpretations for 40 minutes and then you go and have some, crackers and like grape juice. To Orthodoxy, that's a massive leap. But from like a Catholic, let's not say like the TLM because it's not that common nowadays. But from that, even easier. I mean, but even like a regular Novus Ordo, conservative Novus Ordo service, you would find the transition much easier.
Yep.
The thing is with Catholicism, it's so philosophical and so Aristotelian that it really, really bent them in many ways. Thomas Aquinas had a wonderful mind, a brilliant man, but it doesn't matter because his thinking was already directed in many ways
yes.
by by his religion, you know.
Yep.
So he makes mistakes, obviously, but that's because you have this constriction of a mindset. We as well. So I don't think any Catholic would be insulted by saying, "Hey, your thinking is influenced by Thomas Aquinas."
Right.
They would take it as a compliment.
Yes.
I hope. But ours is influenced by our prominent theologians in that sense of more modern sense of theologian.
Yeah, 'cause they took a more of a scholastic approach,
Exactly,
rather than like engaging in the mysteria. For us, it's more about like experience rather than like knowledge based.
Yeah. So again, that's sort of the problem, like with the word choice that I mentioned, like the nephesh, then the serpent, and which you choose. They sort of went about choosing, and without any footnotes, so it restricted it, which is highly unfortunate. But it is what it is. However, I believe that there's also a deep longing for mystery, which has been almost stripped fully from Catholics with the removal of the traditional Latin Mass. And I used to find it funny, but I saw a comment that says, "Are you people enjoying our spiritual pain?" And I realized I did, and felt horrible about it, and so I stopped enjoying it. Yeah, I was laughing,
It's
and then
self-inflicted though. That to me, like, anyways.
well, it's inflicted from on high in their hierarchy, and
well, mean, why would you get into a belief system without looking at the history? That's what I mean more. Like, I would never,
because you grew up with it.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, I guess I would be a hypocrite because I left Orthodoxy for a bit.
Exactly.
So I'm a hypocrite. I apologize. I retract my statement. Sorry.
It is part of the human experience.
It certainly is.
We live in a certain way, and it lends itself to many directions, and sometimes people like myself, even though I left for atheism, so not exactly picking the wrong historical church. It was more like, okay, this God thing doesn't make sense to me. But then I refused to leave Orthodoxy, even though I had my doubts, all the way to to understanding it better, and then having those doubts done away with. To someone like yourself, which is more similar to what I did than becoming a Protestant, because again the historical element of it is removed, but you can study back into it, and often their arguments aren't horrible. Again, their biggest problem is too philosophical, but the historical argument they really can't hold up against.
No, if they even know it.
When Jay points out like the problem of the second and the first Vatican councils, and they just don't work together.
That's so true. So true.
So
the first Protestant was the Pope.
Or the first humanist, if you ask St. Justin Popovich.
True.
True. So that's how he.
That's true. I didn't know
said
that.
it.
I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, he said this is the first time everything became so human-centered.
Yeah, that's true.
I understand that Catholics would disagree, but from our perspective, we're not looking at Metropolitan Neophytos of Morpho. Sure, he is based, but we're not saying put him in charge of Orthodoxy and we'll be back. Well, yeah, but who's going to come after him? There's no shortage of horrible bishops, archbishops, and patriarchs.
Yes.
Lest we forget, some of them were heads of Constantinople. So here's the funny thing. There was an Arian church in Constantinople.
There was?
And can you guess when the last one was closed? And by whom?
No.
Let's not go when, by whom?
No, I have no idea.
By Nestorius.
Really? See, God has a sense of humor. I swear. I don't know if I could say that, but I think he does. I think he's a funny guy.
I definitely think so. But
That's so good.
That's like heretic-friendly fire.
That's making the highlight reel. That's making the highlight reel. That's so good. I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, but the Roman Catholic converts I've seen, they tend to. So you notice the thinking patterns, but they adopt pretty well, I think. Because they have a similar approach.
Yep.
They would quote different church fathers, and even church fathers we would share. They would understand differently. But the mindset isn't so foreign, which just goes to show that with all the problems of Catholicism, look at where the people who reformed it are now. Less than 500 years out.
Yep, the end result definitely dictates.
Where are the Lutherans? Oh, they go. Oh, well, I go to like the Synod of Southeast Mississippi, and we're pretty good. Let me tell you. I go, oh, great! That's what the Reformation brought.
Yeah.
Like 5 bishops who don't have like female clergy.
It's so true, man. It's so true. Like you look at the end result, and you're like, dude, it's pretty clear that something's wrong here. Something
look at the Anglicans, look at the Calvinists and their offshoots, and even the Anabaptists. Like, where's the whole? Because they hate tradition.
Absolutely, yeah.
Even if it's good or bad, they just hate it. And if it's good or bad is determined by whether they like it or not.
Yes, if it's convenient.
Yeah. So if I don't like no female clergy rule. That's just a tradition of men, and St. Paul was talking about something else. So there we go.
Yep.
Proper epistemology achieved.
And wine and crack. What is it? The grape juice and crackers. How they miss? Where is it in? Is it John? Where he clearly identifies what the Eucharist is, and the way that they go about playing word games.
John 6:55, I believe, says, "For my flesh is meat indeed, and my blood is drink indeed."
Indeed.
And that indeed in Aramaic would be like amen. So like an amen.
Yeah, it is.
So how do you make it more clear than that?
Exactly. Yeah. It's
like eat of the body and drink of the blood of the Son of Man.
Yeah.
And you will have, or you won't have life in you.
Yeah. Yeah,
and those who refuse will, but they say, well, that means like the body, the bread of faith and the blood of prayer and whatever the hell not.
Yes.
It doesn't matter. It's all susceptible to interpretation, which is why you can't go with sola scriptura. No text is authoritative. That's not how texts work. Correct. I guess you could say, well, the Bible is a different thing altogether. We would agree. Like the Bible is special. It's still a text. And if heretics can, and there's no Protestant I've met who doesn't believe that there are heretics. So if they can misinterpret it, but I have pure intentions, well then.
Of course.
Well, good for you.
Of course.
And they have no concept of prelest and stuff. Yes. So for them, like confusion and deception is something other people need to worry about, which is the worst mindset a Christian could have.
Well, yeah, it's because it's so self-centered at the same time, and it's like not too far from the New Age concept of deification of the self, where you are you're the interpreter of truth. It's very egoistic.
The difference between theosis and apotheosis.
Yes. Yep. That's true. Listen, my brother, we're at 2.5 hours. I didn't realize that until I looked at the clock, and then I'm like, oh wow.
Yeah, it's like almost midnight here, but
Okay.
it was a fun chat.
Give me your final thoughts on anything if you have any, and then also plug anything you got coming up. And I think I'm just gonna just go out there and say I think we should do a second interview at some point, or a second conversation at some point.
Sure. Well, not exactly. I have no closing words because we talked about multiple things,
Yes.
and I lack the string to tie it all together into one. So people will have to make do with
It's very common on our show.
I guess, because I don't know. I'm telling you, no string long enough. As far as what I'm planning on, I'm currently, if people don't know it, I'm undergoing like studies and examinations to get a license to be a pharmacist, because I'm to get like a day job and then do this. So it's consuming a lot of my time, like studying and stuff. But I'm thinking of some pre-recorded ones for my channel, the Posh Redneck, and I will stream when I find the time and have a topic at hand. So I'm thinking of doing more on like going into specific words. Like I went into justice. I did a stream on the word itself and the concept and how it goes through the Old Testament and like how it's used in Egypt and in Greece and Rome, because it's important to understand it when something is like judge not lest ye be judged. Yes. And you just think it's passing remarks, talking behind someone's back, or thinking poorly of them. But then in the Bible it says judge the widows, and you're like, what? Judge the orphans. Right. So to summarize that whole thing, just to give you a flavor, judge means to set things in order. So if I'm going to judge someone who I think is doing something wrong, that means doing something about it. And if I judge an orphan, that means helping feed them, adopt them, or get them adopted by someone else. Judging the widow means helping feed the children and helping them with different weathers, whether they need firewood or whatever. It has a whole set of meanings that this small piece does not work to encompass. But what happens when you say, well, I think this person, like Kenneth Copeland, with his drivel and shouting and very pretty eyes, when you say this isn't Christian, oh, judge not lest ye be judged. Well, I agree. At the same time, this man is speaking gibberish and has a personal fleet of airplanes.
Yes. Yeah. Well, so isn't judgment meant in the sense of not to condemn? Isn't that where like the Greek root comes from?
That's part of it.
Okay.
Right. Okay. I'm trying to remember the Greek word for it.
For judging?
Theos. Oh. Christ, it escaped me. Okay. But nevertheless, as I said, it ultimately derives from the Egyptian, like ma'at, like this idea of setting things in order. So when someone creates a disorder by committing a crime, that needs to be rectified, and that's justice, punishing the criminal.
Okay.
So obviously, from an Orthodox perspective, that's going to have its own or a Christian perspective, that's going to have a different thing than just brutalize people so people stop breaking the law. It's a different one. It's a longer one.
Okay, sorry, I didn't mean to. I could
like a Theoskini or something. As I said, it eludes me. But whatever the case. I did like a stream on that, and I plan on doing others.
Yes.
So
that's awesome.
Hopefully something like that next week, and then streams when I feel like it. Like I've been doing a lot of geopolitics recently. I found that to be interesting. Concerning as well, but also
As it
interesting.
should be. Yeah.
So that's basically it. I'm not particularly known for being consistent with streaming, but
Me too. It's only a new thing now that I'm trying to do. I feel you, brother.
well, then we that's sympathetic. You know?
It is. You must be the best at wordplay and puns. With a couple of drinks and
And I haven't even been drinking, so you can imagine how bad things get.
I can't wait. Well, listen, brother, I really appreciate this conversation more than you probably know. And thank you so much for taking out time to join me today. And I really look forward to the next one because I really had fun with this stuff. I like to geek out on these kinds of things.
I had loads of fun myself, so it wasn't difficult to set the time aside.
Awesome.
And looking forward to the next one. Just let me know, and we'll organize. I'm usually generous with my time, but when I have like exams and stuff, I will just tell you if I can't.
Oh yeah, of course. No, I'm not going to force you, dude. I show up in
Send the
Serbia at your
cocktails.
door. Malaka, where are you? Oh, I had a request before you go. If you can, one of my listeners, Moldy Apples. I'm sure you know him.
Yeah,
He wants the etymology of the word malaka.
Malak.
I'm just kidding. We'll talk off air.
I'll look into it,
Okay.
and for the next stream, we'll start with that.
Love it. I love it. All right, brother. Thank you so much for joining me today. Have yourself a great night.
God bless.
God bless.